I'm Stephen John Drew from Better Podcasting, a podcast about podcasting, part of the GonnaGeek Network. Just like the show you're checking out now. Shows on the network are individually owned, and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find fantastic geeky shows at GonnaGeekNetwork.com.
This is the official GonnaGeek.com show. Here we run down the latest news and happenings in the world of geek. These are your hosts for the show, Stephen, Chris, and SP.
Welcome back to an all-new episode of the official GonnaGeek Show. It's 2024, and I am Steven, and I'm pleased to say, for some weird reason, I don't know why they're still with me, SP is here this week.
Happy New Year! Yep, it's 2024, everybody. We came back. You said we were going to come back, and we're back.
And he also hasn't abandoned me for some weird reason, Chris Farrell.
But I have fallen to the dark side, so that is something to consider.
You are not on the dark side. You are on the light side.
Dark side.
Because you have a lot more snow than me, and thus it is lighter.
That is true. We did get a fair amount of snow today, and ice, which is less fun.
Yeah, that's not fun.
Yeah, no.
It can be. It depends on what you want to do. If you want to make ice castles, it's good. If you want to go ice skating, it's good. If you want ice for your scotch, it's good.
If you want to be Buffalo Bills playing a football event, not so good.
I mean, they won. Tremendous home field advantage.
Well, okay, bad for the fans then. Fair enough.
I know they were having fun. Did you see all the snowballs flying?
They were a bit lubed up, but that wasn't the worst NFL game for weather. That was the Kansas City one, where when they would get a water out of the cooler, it would freeze. It was so cold as soon as they touched it.
Listen. The Kansas City game, you know it's bad when Taylor Swift goes to the window, and as soon as the camera goes to her, she turns around and runs away.
That's a fair point. You know, when Taylor's not taking the paparazzi's look on her, it's a bad situation.
Something about that coat, that specialized coat. I don't know which one of the other wives did it, but yeah, that was a pretty cool coat. I want one.
Yes, I want one too. And hey, by the way, over this break, in our Discord server, I believe, over at GonnaGeek.com/Discord, you pointed out that I was ahead of the T-Swift fandom, that if you go way back in the GonnaGeek Show archives, you will find that for a long time, the show opened with me saying a T-Swift nod. It wasn't a quote, but it was a quote from me about T-Swift. So, hey, I was on the T-Swift train before it was cool.
I'll be on the T-Swift train now. It's cool. I mean, she single-handedly got me back in the NFL this year because Lord knows my team, if I can call it my team, because I really am a Laps fan, sucks.
Yeah, they do.
Chris, I was thinking of you last week, by the way, before we get into the news. I was thinking about you.
I'm concerned.
Well, this is different than my usual evening thinking of you.
I mean, that's even worse.
Yeah.
I'm more concerned.
No, it's actually, I decided that I was going to, well, let me set the stage first off. A couple weekends ago, I was sitting there. I'm like, you know what? I'm caught up with most of my TV, and I think I'm going to go and watch some TV shows. So I thought, well, I haven't watched the Marvel What If series yet. So I could watch that. And then all of a sudden I had this inspiration to rewatch the Kenobi series. And then I went, which one should I watch? And I went to our Discord, and our Discord said, you should watch What If. And after it took me a couple nights to get through one episode because I just kept falling asleep for some reason, I'm not knocking on What If, just for some reason I wasn't feeling it. I decided instead to start from the scratch of watching The Rookie. And so I started watching that, and I'm almost through season 2. And I know you had that on your list many, many years ago that you used to watch The Rookie. And I don't know if you still do, but don't spoil anything for me.
I enjoy a little Nathan Fillion in my life.
And I have to say, I was quite hooked on it. I like a crime drama sort of thing every now and then. I got hooked on it in season 1. I felt bad that I did not take your advice sooner. However, I will say I'm almost through season 2. I think I'm on the last episode of season 2. and they sure looked like they changed their footing and lost their footing a little bit during the middle of season 2. It started to feel a little bit too much cop crime drama, but then I felt like it found some of its nuance, its humor towards the end of the season. So I'm powering through that, and I have not gone back to What If yet. So there you go. I thought of you.
I haven't either. I need to.
You know, I got COVID over the holidays, and I thought I can't feel any worse than I feel right now. So I decided to go on Netflix and watch like 4 of the DC EU movies that I haven't seen. And honest to God, I felt worse. I felt worse. It was so bad. So Black Adam, the Shazam, Fury of the Gods, the Birds of Prey, and the Suicide Squad, the one that I said I would never watch,
the James Gunn one.
Yes. Better, still not my cup of tea. So yeah, I watched all that, and then I capped it off with icing on the cake. Now watch Foundation. If you guys have not seen Foundation, it is on Apple TV Plus. So I realize a lot of people don't have it, but Foundation and gosh, what was the space one that Ronald D. Moore is doing? I can't remember the name of it, but those 2 series alone, so worth it. Foundation could be some of the best sci-fi ever.
I would have to actually consult a list of the DC movies and probably refresh myself on the plot of them to know whether or not I have, because there's a few that I've just here and there just stumbled across and been like, okay, fine, I'll just watch that. I got a couple hours, but most of them I think not. So maybe I should at some point, without the COVID, watch it.
I mean, I
skip
think,
that part.
Yeah, I think, phasing in and out of consciousness actually aided me not feeling even worse.
Well, you heard it here first. If you're feeling like crap, you can feel crappier.
Real quick on TV, then, if we're talking about it, do you guys remember the show At Midnight that was on Comedy Central?
No. Yes, I heard about that. Go ahead.
The spin-off / sequel to it starts tonight as we record this on January 16th. I guess technically tomorrow morning at 12:35 a.m. after midnight, which is basically a resurrection of At Midnight, hosted by comedian Taylor Tomlinson instead of Chris Hardwick now. Very excited for that one because I really did enjoy At Midnight.
I don't know anything about that. And I heard about this and I didn't recognize the name Taylor Tomlinson, but I saw a few clips and I will check it out.
If you get a chance, her stand-up specials on Netflix are absolutely hilarious.
Well, I look forward to finding out more about her.
Just so we don't get a ton of hate mail from our fans, Kent in the chat nailed it. The series that I couldn't remember is called For All Mankind.
Ah, there we go. Hey, I also decided to watch the Apple TV series. Oh man, now I can't remember the name of it.
Ted Lasso?
No, it just wrapped up. The one,
The Morning Show
with Russell and what's his? Oh man, Monarch.
Succession?
Monarch.
Oh.
Yeah. What's the actor's name?
I don't know. I've heard of the series.
He's got a son. This is just, I'm just selling it here. I'm going to leave this all in too.
This is Kurt Russell and
Kurt
Wyatt.
Russell. There we go. Kurt Russell and Wyatt Russell.
Is his son Wyatt Russell also, or is it different? I can't remember.
So they're both in it. They play the same character in 2 different time periods. Honestly, can't give it a glowing recommendation. Kept me going because it was told through a mystery type feel, and so they hooked me into wanting to find out what would happen. But there's a lot of spots that I was like, wow, that's pretty rough acting. So can't recommend, but if you want to check it out, go ahead.
Worse than my acting?
No. All right, let's start with the news here. And that was me playing you off, by the way, SP. Because I thought you were going to earn an Emmy for your acting.
No such Emmy here. Posthumously, worst actor ever, worst voice actor ever, possibly, but no, nothing else than that. Anyway, let's talk a little space here. It's been a while since I've been able to talk space. Matter of fact, the last time we recorded was more than 2 months ago. It was November 13th, 2023. The reason I know this is I had to go back in time and figure out what had happened since that period of time, since, I talk about Starship and what happened at that point in time. Well, when we podcasted last time, the Starship Integrated Flight Test 2 was imminent, but it did not yet go off. So a couple days after we podcasted, as a matter of fact, 5 days after we recorded our previous episode, SpaceX did launch the Starship Integrated Flight Test, or IFT-2 mission, from their starbase in, get your drinks ready, boys and girls, Boca Chica, Texas. The Starship stack consisted of Booster 9 and Ship 25. The flight had a successful Booster 9 firing for about 2 minutes, 41 seconds. Ship 25 performed a successful hot staging event, first one ever for Starship, I think first one ever for SpaceX. Booster 9 relit after the separation, 9 out of 10 engines, but then had multiple engine failures, and it was commanded to be destroyed at 3 minutes, 21 seconds into the flight because the boost back burn was not working, and they needed to get rid of the booster before it did destroy more stuff on the way down. Ship 25 continued on, but it also commanded an engine cutoff and termination at 8 minutes, 5 seconds. We learned a little bit more about that just in the last few days, so stay with me. We'll figure out what happened there. The Ship 25 destruction was due to its payload. And you're like, SP, I didn't think there was any payload on it. You're right, there wasn't any payload. What they did take up instead was excess liquid oxygen instead of a payload, because you need some mass. I mean, the rocket's got so much power. In order to actually control it sufficiently, you have to launch it with some mass, which is why we got Starman. Was that what it was with the Falcon Heavy a few years ago? Where's Starman with Elon Musk's Tesla?
I believe so.
On board. Yeah, that's why we got that, because they needed some mass. So he's like, okay, I got a car. Let's launch the car. In this case, they did not launch a car. They launched liquid oxygen. I did not get a really good technical explanation, but the short explanation was they vented the liquid oxygen before they got into orbit, and the venting then led to an explosion. So apparently, if they change the process and how they vent the liquid oxygen, or they don't take liquid oxygen up and they actually take a payload up, it's not going to explode. So, and that is interesting. Elon Musk himself on the 12th of January said basically, without the liquid oxygen, as the payload, the rocket, the Ship 25, would have made it into orbit. So what were the goals of what's going on according to Elon Musk? He wants to launch Starlink version 2 by the end of 2024. And that, of course, is with Starship. He wants to basically create what he called Moonbase Alpha, but he was really referring to Space 1999. So I guess the Moonbase could have been Alpha in that. It's been a while since I watched that. I did try to watch it, but it got so bad that I stopped. And then in order to sustain a colony on Mars, he needs to launch 1 million pounds to orbit per year, which is a lot, but is within their goals because they basically launched more in 1 year than any other country in the world has ever done. They had a total of 96 launches, and he really sells it at what they did last year, and they're just going to continue to get better in terms of pacing for flight, unless they have like a catastrophic event with a Falcon 9 that grounds the entire fleet.
So,
okay, so
1 million pounds, that's like 10 North Americans, right?
No, it's 9.
9, right. I forgot to carry the 1.
9.213675.
I mean, it's what airlines have to do to, calculate the weight of their planes and stuff these days, right? So this is a known factor. Anyway, what were the successes with the IFT-2? Let's go back to that. Stage 0, which is the launch equipment, was not destroyed, and the water deluge system performed as advertised. It was brand new, first time used in this flight. The first stage worked up to stage separation, check. The hot staging was a success, check. And Ship 25 flight was a success all the way up until termination. So check all the way up into orbit. And it sounds like if they just don't vent the O2, they're going to get orbit next time. So all good, right? Well, the FAA, the day after, I believe, the launch said a mishap occurred during the SpaceX Starship IFT-2 launch, and they called it OFT, not IFT, launch from Boca Chica, Texas on Saturday, November 18th. The anomaly resulted in a loss of the vehicle. No injuries or public property damage have been reported. The FAA will oversee the SpaceX-led mishap investigation to ensure SpaceX complies with its FAA-approved mishap investigation plan and other regulatory requirements. All right, that's IFT-2. We'll go back to Starship in a second. In the meantime, NASA had a teleconference about the Artemis program on the 9th of January, which is the day before, or day after, it was 3 days before Elon spoke. Anyway, they had a teleconference. It's on YouTube. It's available. We'll put the link in the show notes. Artemis 2 is now scheduled for no earlier than, so it's not no later than, it's no earlier than September of 2025. So it's not going to be this year. It'll be next year that we go back to the moon. The uncrewed human landing system landing on the moon is now scheduled for 2025. That is the Starship HLS. And it has been known both in this teleconference and in Elon Musk's statement that it will take at least 10 refueling flights are necessary to get one HLS to lunar orbit. So that's 11 launches for Starship in order to get one Starship ship to lunar orbit. Seems a little daunting until you look at the pace of actual launches from Falcon and Falcon Heavy this last year. So it's conceivable, it's doable. I don't know what time frame that's doable in, but it's what we're going for right now because we don't have another option. So Artemis 3 is scheduled, and that's the actual landing on the moon for people again. It is scheduled for no earlier than September 2026. So all this can slide to the right, but right now, to get a person back on the moon will be September 2026, which is 2.5 years from today.
Wait. Isn't Suncast on the moon base right now, or is he in the Jupiter base?
Yeah, but he didn't get there with Starship. He got there on Hopes and Dreams.
I thought he used a choppa eye.
There were some tears involved too, I think.
Come on, nobody's going to give me credit for speaking in gold.
That
was impressive.
Very impressive.
So what are the cause of the delays? So everybody wanted to know. I mean, the press was hot. I mean,
that's always the answer, right?
Stick enough money in there and you can speed anything up, right? But there's a point of like diminishing returns there. Anyway, the cause of the delays is when they did the Artemis 1 mission, when the Orion capsule did a skip reentry back into Earth, there was some unwanted erosion of its heat shield. Now, this would have been mitigated with actual humans not doing a skip reentry, but because it is a noted deficiency from the flight, they need to study it, find out what happened, and find out how to prevent it from happening. They kept saying during the teleconference that astronaut safety is our number one concern. And because of that, they're not going to just race to the moon and back. They're going to do it safely. So the heat shield was one. There was some valve circuitry, which in the life support system, they needed to go over again in Orion. And apparently its electrical system needs to be beefed up because its launch abort system might run out of power if it actually had to do an abort. And it's not like we haven't seen an abort. It wasn't done by NASA or SpaceX. It was done by Blue Origin, remember, with the New Shepard abort sequence that happened a year and a half ago or so. So this can happen. So they just want to make sure that no astronauts are harmed and that the Orion capsule has enough power, electrical power, to power everything it needs to command it to do different things at different parts of time. As a tertiary, secondary, whatever thing out of the teleconference, it was mentioned that the UAE, that's the country, the United Arab Emirates, is now making part of the Gateway. It'll be a docking ring that goes on the Gateway, and the Gateway is going to be the space station that orbits the moon. Russia was going to make it. Now the UAE is making it. And now because of that, they will have access to put one of their, I don't know what they call it over there, and I'm sorry, astronaut, for lack of a better term, on the moon by actually providing this technology. So that was important information from the teleconference. Now let's get on to IFT-3, which might or might happen before we record again. The FCC is expected to approve a launch sometime in February 2024. I am looking into the possibility of attending this one. I might have to support it from my unit, from my location, but we'll see. I would very much like to see this one in person. Booster 10 and Ship 28 will comprise the stack. The launch site improvements are ongoing. They were just taking some of the old water tanks down and demolishing them with surprising speed, actually. And what they're planning on doing with the IFT-3 is doing a cryogenic propellant transfer on orbit demonstration test. This is to prove that it is possible to transfer fuel in 0G so that they can go ahead and do like a real live transfer, put actually 2 starships up there and try to do a transfer up on orbit eventually, because that's what they're going to have to do to get the human landing system to the moon. They're also going to demonstrate the payload bays. They won't be taking any actual satellites up with them, but Starship will be used to launch payloads into orbit, and Starlink satellites, the version 2 Starlink satellites, the only launch vehicle that can take them is Starship. So this is important for their future there. As for the HLS, I mentioned before about their landing on the moon in 2025. They're going to have to do an uncrewed flight test as well in early 2025. And then the Dear Moon, you guys remember the Dear Moon mission? You remember what I'm talking about when I say Dear Moon?
Yeah, that was where they were going to put a deer on the moon.
That is absolutely correct.
We wrote letters, Dear Moon, please don't crash into us unless it's Steven's house.
Yeah, and please don't spray your cheese everywhere.
I mean, I do like cheese.
Yeah.
Wonder what lunar cheese tastes like.
I thought it was Swiss.
Ooh, I like Swiss cheese. It is holy. The moon's holy.
It is. Yeah. No, I thought it was more of like blue cheese because it's blue moon.
Yeah, blue cheese is gross.
It is gross.
It depends on what time of the year. Anyway, the Dear Moon mission was SpaceX's mission to actually put people in orbit around the moon in a Starship. The 10 or so people were just civilians. None of them were astronauts or anything. And a fellow YouTuber, and I say fellow very lightly there because while we're streaming on YouTube, I don't really consider us YouTuber, but we are on YouTube, so maybe we can consider ourselves YouTube.
Disagree with your assessment. You say fellow YouTuber because in all reality, we're way up here and they're way down here.
We're looking down at Everyday Astronaut, right? Anyway, Everyday Astronaut is part of that crew, and they're planning on going up. It was originally supposed to be, I believe, this year, and then it got pushed back to 2025. I don't know when it's going to happen. There was no update to that mission. Anyway, that was a lot. Thanks for sticking with me throughout the whole thing. Do you guys have any questions or smart alecky comments? I like both.
I have a question, which might be a smart alecky comment.
Okay.
You're talking about safety and how safety is so important. Can I ask, why hasn't SpaceX yet consulted with Boeing to make sure that everything is safe?
There are a lot of Boeing safety experts out there. Whether or not they're listened to, I don't know.
That, Boeing seems to have a flawless track record with everything right now.
Flawless. Makes you want to fly in a 737 and a 777 right now, right today, right?
No.
That was simple.
I was gonna make a smart ass remark there, and then I just realized no, there's no need. Just no.
Yeah. So for those that don't remember, the MH370, the Malaysian aircraft that went down somewhere in the Indian Ocean, that was a 777. There were a couple other incidents with 777s around that time with cockpit fires due to wiring. And then, of course, lately, what Steven's referring to is the attempt to finally kill him by Boeing ejecting a door that was supposed to be bolted on. This is not an escape hatch. It was a door that was bolted on to the side, or I should say lack of being bolted on to the side of the aircraft, was ejected over Oregon. I mean, they got so close. Just a couple of, you got Washington and then Canada's right above there. So they got really close, but they didn't get you yet.
Not yet. Hopefully soon.
I mean, we're just citing you in. We'll get there eventually.
Closer and closer by the day.
We're going to send lunar cheese down to your home in the express manner.
Perfect. Well, thank you for updating us on all that, SP. Do greatly appreciate that. And we look forward to you telling us all about the next series of delays.
Editorialize much.
There's that smart alecky comment. I love it. I love it. And what's even better, it's true.
All right, let me take you down the first of a few Apple rabbit holes to this show. If you didn't know this, Apple makes smartphones. I know this might be mind-blowing for some of the audience out there, but yes, Apple has made smartphones for a year or two now, and they are finally in the global lead. That's right. The International Data Corporation, known as the IDC, has put out information saying that for the first time ever, Apple has dethroned Samsung as the number one person, the lead in global shipments of smartphones. I almost said something bad there. That's right. For a long time, Samsung has held the number one spot worldwide, and Apple has had an increase and have finally leaped over Samsung. So you're saying, wow, this means that Apple is now the iOS is the global leader in the smartphone market. Well, no, not quite that. And I'm not taking away from Apple here by any stretch of the imagination, because it is quite the feat of what they've done. You have to remember that this is Apple versus a series of other manufacturers. So Apple basically saw a 3.7% market share increase, and Samsung saw a 13.6% market share decrease. So Apple had 20.3% of global smartphone market share in 2023 compared to Samsung's 19.4%. So there's a whole bunch of other manufacturers involved in there, and you got to remember all that. And the thing is, apparently Samsung's decrease is actually partly because of an increase in other Android manufacturers such as Google chipping away at Samsung's powerful grip that they've had for a very, very long time. And they've really dominated for a long time as far as, worldwide Android, obviously, I guess in general, smartphone number one spot, holding that number one ranking. But that, again, not to take away from Apple, because, for a long time, Apple was seeing a decrease, and now they've been working their way back up. And this is good for Apple. And I want to know what your guys' theories are on this. I have a theory that this is a projection of all the other things Apple has been doing right in the Apple ecosystem. And it's just becoming more and more appealing for people to have the all-in-one solution. And, there's a large generation, which was ours, that is now getting pushed out by a younger generation, which is more familiar with Apple. For a long time, we grew up with Windows computers. You have to be in Windows in order to do this, to be in the workforce. Windows was the king of all of these things. And we're seeing the shuffle happen, and we're seeing more and more people not need as much out of their, PC life and their non-phone life. And so when they do these things, they're looking for the harmonized approach. And Apple is the only one that offers that. And so that's my theory on why they're continuing to grow after, for a long time, seeing a decline, is they're doing a lot right for the Apple ecosystem, that uniformity. That's my theory.
I think that's a fair theory. I think there's also a good theory that, other Android makers have been stepping up their game. And there's some actually really cool alternatives, especially if we go and look at foldables out there. Like Samsung was first to the game with foldables, for instance, and they've done a real good job with it. But now they've got competition, as there's a variety of folks making foldables. Like, for instance, the Motorola ones, both cool and cheaper than Samsung's. So I think there's some competition amongst Android developers that make it so that they're beating themselves up, while Apple's numbers are also growing. I mean, let's be honest here. Samsung, still a big deal, will likely to continue to be. What is honestly going to be really interesting from an Apple point of view is when/if the Apple foldable is created, and how that compares to what's out there now. Because I fully admit I was a foldable skeptic at first because I didn't think they'd ever be able to get the price point to a place that was reasonable. But we're starting to see that now. Not with the flagship foldables, mind you, but we're getting to a point where the flagships might be reasonably priced. And that's going to be the next interesting evolution of smartphone. And I think that's going to be very interesting from an Apple perspective to see how they combat other foldables out there and what makes it uniquely Apple when they put theirs out.
Are there any rumors on an Apple foldable, like solidly
there
though?
are.
Like solidly.
Yes. So the iPad mini is projected to be disappearing this year from the lineup. And it is to be replaced by a foldable that when it's closed would be the size of a mini. And when it opens up is the size of a full iPad.
The reason why I asked that is because, to Apple's credit, they usually hold back until the technology is right. We saw that with wearables. We've seen that with other things. And I feel like foldables are still a little bit away from being able to mitigate the complaint factor. Because
the iPad mini is the perfect way for them to enter into this market. It's the size that I have an iPhone Pro Max right in my hand, right here. The iPad mini is not that much bigger, although it is. And I do like the size of the iPad mini. Matter of fact, I got one right here. You guys are always impressed about how I often have everything around. So here's an iPad mini. It's got the thing closed because my security cams are on it, and I don't want it. And here is the iPad, my kid's there, the iPhone. So it's not that much bigger. So the iPad mini has been relegated to, I don't know if it's really marketable for us right now. So we know that there's a market out there for those that like the mini size. So let's go ahead and let's experiment and let's put a foldable out that is iPad mini size. So the people that are in need of a tech refresh for the iPad mini size will have to go for it. And then the people that want a foldable will go for it as well. So there is a timing factor here with technology refresh, because the last iPad mini was the iPad mini 6, and I think it's 3 or 4 years old. So you're getting to the point with those that do have iPad minis and use them for work. A lot of women like the iPad mini because it's really cool to fit in your purse. It's reader size versus full tablet size. So there is a market. The price point is going to be the issue. So Apple's going to take a gamble here, and they're going to throw the foldable out on the table, and they're going to see if it sticks or not. If it does stick, then they will have the ability to go forward with some new technology, whereas it's not tied to a phone line and it's not tied to a full tablet line.
The foldable tablet, at least to me, doesn't have as much appeal because my tablet is a separate thing from my cell phone and my workflow on things. But having a phone that I can unfold into a larger display when I'm out and about, that's something I find more interesting. And I think that's why foldable phones have been something that's interesting to me. But it's really going to be a matter of when/if Apple puts their foldable out, what's the price point? Because we've seen all of these Android vendors who've done foldables, their first gen foldable product, it's not greatly priced for people who are just hobbyists. It's great for the tech reviewers and for people that don't mind dropping $2,000 on a phone. That's fine. But for your traditional user, asking for $2,000 for a foldable phone, like, oh, hell no, I don't need that. I think that's going to be one of the interesting things coming out. And Kent actually brings up an interesting point. Is the real question is, when do we get the flexible screens? That we've seen some of those things at CES. We've seen it with OLED things where there's some phones before where you literally just pull two sticks apart basically, and it's a screen. Now, those are also CES demos. That doesn't mean they're coming anytime soon. But I think that is honestly the really cool eventual evolution of the foldable is into something like that.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see, because I do think Apple usually does put the brakes on something until the bugs are resolved. And there still continues to be some folding problems, not taking a certain amount of force and all that stuff. And I just don't see Apple putting out a product that where if the customer is used to using their phone a certain way, if they're going to do that with a foldable, it's going to break. I don't see them doing that. So I'd be really curious to see what Apple puts forward.
Yeah, foldables fascinate me. I'll give a plug to a guy that doesn't need it here, but if Mr. Mobile, Michael Fisher on YouTube, he is very fixated on foldable phones and things like that. He rotates them in and out of his lineup all the time, and he has an ongoing series of all of his experiences with different vendors and stuff like that, and his different use cases, and makes a compelling case for eventually they'll get to a point for mass adoption. But right now, it's a niche thing that he really enjoys. But he sees the future as foldables for many people. Not all people, mind you.
First of all, Stephen, just remember you're holding it wrong.
Right?
And second of all, one of the reasons why Apple has been not dominating, but at the head of the class for a while is because they choose the colors of their phones that everybody likes more so than other manufacturers.
Fair enough.
That was supposed to be a joke. Anyway, the real reason that I think that they are still at the top of the heap is because their stuff works. It is reliable for the most part, unless you're holding it wrong, right? And the iOS is actually supported for a very long time, whereas other phones, specifically in the Android line, might not be supported as long. So if you're looking for a phone, you're like, okay, maybe I'll hang on to this for 3 to 5 years. You're going to know that Apple is going to support the iOS for that for 3 to 5 years, whereas Android, it gets a little sketchy about the 3-4 year mark.
Well, I mean, Google and Samsung and all the major vendors are all doing 5 years worth of security updates and 3 to 5 years worth of OS updates and all of them now. So that gap has been narrowed. It's just, it doesn't get talked about a lot.
No, and that's always the problem with comparing to Android is there's the whole scope of different manufacturers that are out there, and some of them are garbage. Yeah, what you get on your phone is the only update you're ever gonna get. So if you
Yes.
So, there are some like that. So, there's the array. And I think that, we're just going to continue to see this happen. And, look at Chris. He's on an Apple ecosystem now, aside from his phone. So, I think Apple's been doing a lot right, to their credit.
What's going to bring it back to be the number one, like by far, like over 50% in the Apple iPhone 16, I believe is the next one. They're going back to the 3.5 millimeter headphone jack.
Let's move on to the next news point. Hey, AI.
Yeah, so let's talk AI. And we've talked before about the murky ethical nature of using AI to replace actors and artists and things like that in movies. Some specific examples where we could argue ethical uses are as what we've seen in some of the Star Wars things, with the resurrection of Peter Cushing as an AI creature, for lack of a better term, Carrie Fisher reprising her role as Princess Leia after her passing. Why I say those are ethical is because the family's permission was obtained and granted for them to be able to use those AI models of those characters. Let's get into the less than ethical ones. Hey, you guys know the comedian George Carlin, right? Legendary.
Yeah, we should probably do some of his famous comedy on here right now.
Yeah, let's do some of his famous comedy. Joking aside, George Carlin's been dead since 2008. He's been gone for a fairly long time. So imagine my surprise.
I want to change my joke. Yeah, he's the guy from Shining Time Station, right? Sorry, go ahead.
So he's been dead since 2008. Imagine my surprise when this weekend I saw, wait, there's a new comedy special from George Carlin coming out? How the hell is this happening? So yes, there is a new comedy special called George Carlin, I'm Glad I'm Dead, using AI replica of George Carlin to crack jokes about mass shootings, farts, and the eventual death of stand-up comedy. It has actually nothing to do with George Carlin and his family or anything like that. And how do we know? Because Carlin's daughter, Kelly, took to Twitter to then denounce the special as it came out. And I'm just going to read the three.
There's a time machine where she was able to go back to the days of Twitter? Is that what you said?
I'm not going down this rabbit hole. I'm going to keep calling it Twitter because that's what I do. I'm contrary. So I will go and read her 3 tweets because that's the best way to sum it up, is her natural thoughts and the fact that they're using AI to resurrect her father to do comedy that will never be at the level of what George Carlin could perform because no computer can replicate his comedy. That's my own personal editorialized moment there. But here's Kelly Carlin's statement. My statement regarding the AI-generated George Carlin special. My dad spent a lifetime perfecting his craft from his very human life, brain, and imagination. No machine will ever replace his genius. These AI generated products are clever attempts at trying to create a mind that will never exist again. Let's let the artist's work speak for itself. Humans are so afraid of the void that we can't let what has fallen into it stay there. Here's an idea. How about we give some actual living human comedians a listen to? But if you want to go listen to a genuine George Carlin, he has 14 specials you can find anywhere. So, what's going on with this? What's the background? This new special was engineered by Will Sasso, who you might know from Mad TV, and novelist Chad Kultgen. They run a podcast called Dudesy, and they released and on this podcast is written by a comedy AI tool that writes material for them to showcase on their YouTube show. They have since posted this special on YouTube. You could go watch it for yourself if you want, but it seems fairly gross because Kelly Carlin made a point of saying the family never gave permission for George Carlin's likeness, voice, jokes, anything like that to be used in an AI-based special. She has stated she's trying to explore her legal options, but something to keep in mind is since AI is going and advancing so rapidly, there's not actually any case law that establishes boundaries right now. So she has reached out to folks like Zelda Williams, Robin Williams' daughter, who has spoken out about the AI use of artists to say, don't ever recreate my father. That's not something he would want. And also to Melissa Rivers, the daughter of Joan Rivers, where you've also had similar folks that have been talking about, oh, well, we can just continue her comedy through AI. No, she's reaching out to those folks right now to kind of say, we need to talk. They're coming for you next. And this whole thing just feels gross to me. They're just exploiting AI tools to create comedy to trick people into thinking it's George Carlin. This is certainly not the ethical use of it. And yes, I sort of linked the House of Mouse to ethical here and how they've used things. But remember, they secured the rights from the families to do everything they've done. They secured the rights with James Earl Jones to use AI to continue to recreate Darth Vader's voice in perpetuity because he and his family signed off on it. Those, while may feel weird because they're not actually those people, I would argue it's okay because the family has signed off and is being compensated. This use of AI to make an unauthorized, for lack of a better term, AI clone of George Carlin to push your own comedy out there that's not his, this just feels wrong. And I don't know how we stop it. I don't know how we get ahead of it other than just people need to speak with their voice on the internet or by not viewing the video, because if they get clicks, they'll keep doing it. I don't like this development. I'm very uncomfortable with it.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think, like with the technology there, the box is open. We're never going to get away from it. And no matter what you do legally and everything, there's always going to be areas around the world where that's not going to matter. But that's always been the case with anything bootleg, anything that's strictly control in many Western worlds and stuff. But I think that one of the first steps needs to be some broad across, many important key countries and places of the world, legal ramifications when people use AI, and it's got to be strict, and it's got to be, almost life damaging to the people who are doing it. Otherwise it's never going to sink in, right? Like, if it's loosely ever, if legal action takes a lot or people don't feel the threat, it's just going to keep happening over and over. But if, like anything, I think if you've got some threats against you, you're going to think twice about it. But the other aspect of it is, I think there's existing laws that are going to come into play, because then you're going to have like the parody defenses and all these other things. And before it was like, oh, you've got these adult parodies. Well, that's clearly not the actor. So, it's not damaging to them. But then you've got like, AI driven adult content now. And so maybe there is parody law there, but then you have to have the other side of it where it's like the AI laws or whatever. So I think we're a long time away from getting this solved. And this is an example of, unfortunately, the problems that are going to exist until those solutions come to be.
We have an early framework for some protections in there, because remember, part of the actors' strike was about concerns of using AI to replace actors, or remember there were the instances of extras that did a bit and they're like, hey, we're going to 3D scan you and then use your 3D image in perpetuity. Some of what the strike was about was protecting actors in that regard. So we sort of have some guardrails coming in place for things from a point forward, but we don't necessarily have anything in place right now for protection of past actors, artists, comedians, musicians, things like that. And I don't know the right way to do it other than to try and legislate it. But do you really, and this is not me getting political, but do we trust that the technology is understood enough by those that would attempt to legislate it that they would be able to put the right guardrails on it? I'm not getting political, I promise.
It's valid.
That's not my intent.
I got a follow-up question for you there, Chris. So if something is in the public domain, so, whatever that is, 25 years, 70 years, 90 years, I forget what it is for copyright protection law, but if it's public domain, I think it's okay to use it for AI purposes.
I don't know. That becomes more the moral question then, is if you use public domain footage of, let's say, arbitrarily Stephen Jondrew to create Stephen Jondrew AI saying things, it might be legal, but is it ethical?
Well, and there's a difference between public domain. This is my understanding with the whole Mickey Mouse thing recently is I'm not a lawyer, so it doesn't take this legal advice, is there are very strict public domain laws. So it's like this version of the thing. So then is AI a different version of the public thing? And then also we're talking public thing, not public people. So I think the whole people factor comes into play.
If it's a performance though, not you're not representing the person, you're representing their character in their last work.
But it still wears that person's face. So
Yeah.
that's where the moral issue comes into.
Okay, fair.
Yeah.
I was going to bring this up anyway. Robin Williams was on your list because Zelda Williams and Melissa Rivers were tagged there. I love Robin Williams. There's a bunch of stuff that he's done over his lifetime that is just amazing, both in the dramatic and the comedy spectrum. I would love to be on a podcast with Robin Williams. Unfortunately, he passed away about 10 years ago. He's not coming back. There's no way to get him as a guest on the podcast or to co-host podcasts with him or anything like that. The only way to do that now is to work in with AI. I would love to do that, and it's just not going to happen. Now, his death was 10 years ago. At the earliest, I'd be able to replicate any of his works or him himself would be 25 years. I think, again, not lawyers. I don't remember the exact copyright protections. It's as much as 90 years. It depends on things, I guess. But if it's 25 years, 15 years out, that could be in my lifetime. And that's interesting. And then from my perspective, I mean, Chris, you brought this up on your All Things Good and Nerdy podcast, that you guys have over 500 hours of you guys talking.
Yeah.
So
At
there's
least.
over 500 hours of you guys saying stuff, of your likeness, of your aging over time, and, my beard going grayer over here. But from your podcast perspective and what you said, there's a lot out there for a lot of people that are social media influencers, that are YouTubers, that are podcasters, that can be used. Matter of fact, Stephen, both you and Waffles have used my voice I think it was 11 Labs, and trying to create a voice of me when I verbally gave you both permission and said, go for it, go ahead, as long as you don't show me in a disparaging way. And you both did it. And that's okay because I gave you permission. But 50 years from now, I'm not going to be around to give my permission. So the legalities are going to come up, and they're going to come up pretty quick. Forrest Gump, right? You had the scenes of Forrest Gump acting with historical figures. Now you throw in AI and those scenes become much more interactive. You're not just going off of historical footage. You're actually creating new footage for works like that. And I think a fictional work, which is why the strike was so important, like Forrest Gump, that is done in the future, I think that's really going to set the legal precedents, and the contracts that are set between the unions and the studios are really going to be what's set forward here. And then, of course, you're going to have legal action, private legal action of, I don't approve of this, whether it's family members, whether it's studios, or, you go into songs, right, with Prince and with other people that have, like Taylor Swift, having to re-record her songs in order to get paid. So that's all part of this.
We might be getting towards some of that sooner than later. There's been some instances. So, for instance, there's a YouTuber out there, and I'm not going to get into any specifics on this YouTuber, but they make Star Wars content, and they like to make fan videos and stuff. This is a fairly controversial creator, and one of the things they did was put a deepfake AI Mark Hamill Luke Skywalker in there. And this person, who is a creator, is problematic at times. Let's just put it that way. And someone asked Mark Hamill, did you give permission? And his only answer at this point has just been a one word, no. And this is where you're going to start seeing things here, is people that are doing their independent projects and they want to do like a fan film or something like that, or a fan audio production that start to do these things. This gets us into the point of, you know, if I were Mark Hamill and someone were using my likeness like that without my authorization, I would not be comfortable with it. Now, there's a difference between a semantic difference, at least, and a moral difference between making a fan film that's just for fun versus if someone created a fake Mark Hamill to be in their commercial and say, endorse them as a lawyer or something like that.
I mean, if they want to take on somebody that is both the Joker and the trickster, their lives are in their own hands.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
This is the Wild West right now, is what we're getting into.
Yeah,
and
I agree.
This is a good example of the George Carlin instance. This just feels gross. And I don't know how you spin it as a good thing that someone is trying to profit off of his name, image, and likeness when he's been dead for over a decade at this point in time. And you know, George Carlin, if you've watched his stand-up or any of his interviews, would hate the ever-living hell out of the idea of an AI version of him performing comedy that's probably nowhere near as smart as George Carlin's actual comedy.
Yeah, I think, you know, as we work through this a little more, I do think like the lack of what I don't know if it's legal threats or money threats or what it is. I think that that's a big variable right now, because there isn't at the moment any reason for people to be worried about this. But like, if you and I were like, hey, you know what? Let's play some Taylor Swift music on this podcast. We know there could potentially be a financial ramification that we have to pay for that down the road.
Dude, I'm just going to shake it off.
Fair enough.
I'll do what I want.
Fair enough. But at the moment, if we want to go and make AI Suncast, since he's in our chat, AI Suncast, there's not a lot of legal threat right now at the moment from him. So if there was, you know, different situation. So I think that, and I would never do that because I'm 100% on the moral train on this. Well, 99%. There's 1% for AISB, but
fair.
But I think that, you know, it is the Wild West. I think you said it best.
Honestly, what's going to drive this train isn't going to be actors, artists, or anything like that. It's going to be when AI crap is used, negative campaigning in politics, I think. That's when
we're probably a few weeks away from that. Yeah.
Or to attribute something to person X that they never said that is used in a negative ad, and then you have to prove it.
That's already happened. That happened in the last campaign.
It happened just a week ago with President Biden, but that's not the topic we need to have here for...
Okay, no, can I just for a second here say Suncast in the chat says, first off, let's make this clear. We're not going to do it. We're not going to do AI Suncast. But in the chat, Suncast says, you do not have permission to create an AI Suncast. This will be the next thing that people are going to be doing out there, like the Facebook. You do not have permission for Facebook, you know, the thing that people post to Facebook.
Yeah.
But, you know, I hope they do give legal, you know, I hope there's legal recourse for these people. But anyways.
That way I read that statement is you do have permission to create an AI Suncast.
Steven doesn't have permission, but he didn't say that SP and I don't have permission.
That's the definition of you.
What happens when AI Suncast gives me permission? Mind blown.
I think you just made my brain throw a rod here.
All right, let's go ahead and move on to a couple quick last 3 news points. We'll get through these quickly here. First off, Galileo.
Oh, we're going to get sued right now.
No, I was just, strolling the internet and I ran into this, and this is a news story legitimately because the announcement came since we recorded last time. But the original Shuttlecraft Galileo from Star Trek, the original series, was completely redone in 2013, and it has been on display several different places, but nowhere permanently. It was first unveiled at the Houston Space Center, and then it moved to the Intrepid Air and Space Museum in New York City. And it is now on its way to Ticonderoga, New York. I probably pronounced that incorrectly. Ticonderoga, whatever. It's north of Albany. And there is a Star Trek set museum where somebody has taken over what I think is an old AutoZone just by the looks of it. I could be completely wrong there, but it looks like an old AutoZone. And they have put in replicas of the sets from the original series in there. So you're talking hallways, transporter room, engine room, bridge, that sort of thing from the Starship Enterprise. There was an announcement that came out, I believe, December 22nd, that said that they are going to make a set that is the Shuttlecraft Bay from the Enterprise, and they're going to put this Shuttlecraft Galileo in it. Now, I think we might have even covered this before, Shuttlecraft Galileo's restoration, long time ago on this show. And just keep in mind, this is not something that was meant to last more than the recording of an episode. So it had been out of the studio for many, many years. It had sat out in somebody's garden in LA. It sat in somebody's barn in Ohio for decades, and it had degraded, and it was made of wood and plywood and just cheap stuff that degraded over time. So some of the original parts had to be completely replaced, but it is in the state that you would have seen it on the set way back in the late 60s when it was actually filming the episode Galileo 7. And it is going to be on display. There's no date given, but it is going to be on display in New York permanently. So if you wanted to see a piece of history that was actually used in the filming of Star Trek, the original series, the Shuttlecraft Galileo, it will be on permanent display in New York. I thought that was pretty neat. I didn't get a chance to see it anywhere else, but I think this is really neat. And if you haven't watched the video of the restoration or the story of the restoration, it wasn't a how-to thing like a lot of YouTube channels are right now. It was more of, this is what we had to do to make it happen. That is available on YouTube for you to watch. It's like 20 minutes or something like that. It was pretty cool.
Wow, I found an article talking about restoration from 2013. So yeah, there's probably a good chance we did talk about Galileo along the way.
I think JS might have brought it up or something. It's tickling in my brain.
We've also talked about like the bridge restoration efforts they did too for the original set of the Enterprise D and things like that. That's one of the really cool things we're seeing is people saving these props and sets that were never really intended to be used again and giving them new life, so that fans can go experience them.
Did you say that fans are getting lice from the Galileo? Is that what you said?
They might have.
I might have stuttered my way into saying something like that. Thank you.
No,
thanks for pointing out my stutter, Steven. Jeez.
It wasn't me. It was AI, Steven.
How ableist of you.
Hashtag Steven's been canceled.
Hashtag cancel Steven.
All right. So this is actually a cool story. Thanks for bringing it up. And I love the fact that we are getting more and more stuff in museums from the past of Trek. Very cool. Well, museums with this asterisk.
There's a few out there too for different props and stuff.
Yeah, again, nothing in here is screen use, and nothing in that museum is screen use. It's just replicas, and they're very, very open about it. What's there today is just replicas, painstakingly made replicas, but replicas of the sets from the original series.
It counts. It counts. All right. Who wants their new Apple Cash Back card? Who wants that?
I'll take 3, please.
Ching!
If you didn't know this, Apple is finally settling Batterygate because, we got to throw gate on everything. For those of you who aren't familiar with this, way back when, Apple users back in 2017 started to notice that their iPhones were getting a little slow and batteries were draining quickly. Guess what? That concern was absolutely bang on because Apple did admit in that era that the iOS software had basically slowed down the performance of older iPhones and that there was a reason for the slowdown that they were doing. They were saying the lithium ion batteries in the older phones had aged and they didn't hold a charge as long, and they could unexpectedly slow down. So the software in turn purposely slowed the performance to stop this from happening, but they did it all without telling people. And so with this lack of transparency and all these other hubbub that happened after that point, there's been a lot of legal action that's been pending. And yep, the settlements are now coming out. If you are an American, I believe that has started in other parts of the world. I'm not sure. I Googled today. It looks like Canada's might still be a little bit delayed. But according to this article that I read, Apple has agreed to pay a minimum of $310 million and a maximum of $500 million to settle this lawsuit. And so there are devices that you may be eligible for if you had an iPhone 6, a 6 Plus, a 6S, a 6S Plus, or an SE, the original SE. You might be eligible if you were running iOS 12.2.1 or later, or the iPhone 7 and 7 Plus if they're running iOS 11.2 or later before December 21st, 2017. So check that out. You might be eligible for some free money. I know that one person that we know has already got their Apple Cash Back card.
Congratulations, JS.
For the record, in the mail today, I received 3 checks. They were $92 and change each. So that apparently is the amount that are being given out to Americans. And in our Discord server, that amount was confirmed by at least one, if not 2 other Discord server members. So almost $93 per phone if you had something that qualified. I remember putting this in way back in the day thinking, I'm not going to get anything. Close to $300. That's, years and years after I stopped using these things. Oh, stop in quotes using them. Yes. They to get $300 back that's something. And I think it had something to do with, like, if you had a battery replacement or something, if you paid the $50 for a battery replacement. So I'll take the money now. And I recognize what was happening at the time. I did have an iPhone 6 that bricked itself because the battery blew up on the inside. So there were legitimate concerns on these batteries. So I get that. But yeah, getting the money, I'll take it. And that'll help me pay off Christmas.
There you go.
And Chris, you wanted to talk something else, Apple, right?
Yeah, I was going to talk this one real quick. This happened near the end of the year. I'd only paid half attention to it, but the Apple Watch Series 9 and Watch Ultra 2 were banned for sale in the United States last year. I'd seen some articles on various tech blogs and stuff. It was like, hey, now's your last chance to go and buy these phones before they're banned. But the International Trade Commission had ruled that the blood oxygen sensors on both those devices infringed on patents from a company called Massimo. Now, Apple has scrambled to make changes to these watches in an attempt to avoid those patents, and U.S. Customs and Border Protection was tasked with determining whether the proposed changes were enough. According to a letter from Massimo's attorneys, all parties have now agreed on a plan to remove this feature from Apple Watch Series 9 and Watch Ultra 2. Bloomberg's reporting that modified watches have already been shipped to Apple retail stores. Stores have not been instructed to begin selling them until corporate officially says they can. So, in order to get around this patent issue, Apple has manufactured Watch Series 9 and Watch Ultra 2 without the blood oxygen sensors. There are devices out there right now that do arguably infringe upon those patents that are available for sale. Nobody knows if part of this negotiation is that Apple's going to have to disable those sensors on the watches that people have bought already. Now, if I were someone who's bought a watch like that with that capability and you removed it from me after the fact, I think Apple might have to send some checks out again like they just did, is more why I was bringing this up.
Yeah, I got me my Apple Watch 9 right here. I was paying attention to the tech news in December and I heard about it. And I was rocking an Apple Watch 6 for a while. So I thought the battery's getting a little long in the tooth. And if I want to continue watching this, wearing this, and I wear it for health reasons. I wear it to monitor my heart rate in case I ever feel like I have chest pains or something. I can check for arrhythmia. It is not a health advice. It is not a certified health device, but it would give me indications on whether or not I really should call an ambulance or go to an emergency room. And so I heard about this. And I was like, I don't want a modified phone. I want everything it has, or a watch. Chris, you said phone a couple of times too.
Oh, did
so
I? My apologies.
It is Apple Watch. So I don't want a modified one. I want the actual one with everything on it. So I went out and bought a 9 that was on sale after the Christmas holiday this year. And I've been holding it up for the camera for the audio only listeners. It is not much different from the 6 other than the battery lasts all day, whereas the other one didn't. And I'm glad I have one. I'm glad I bought it. I will be a little teed if my blood oxygen sensor is disabled.
A little. I'm curious here. Would it be enough that you would be like, I wouldn't have bought this watch if I knew you were going to remove the capability from it?
I would have waited a year because for what I understand, they're looking into alternative technology to put in the next generation of watch. And I don't know when that's going to be. It could be a couple years before they get all that ready, right? Because the pipeline of the supply chain takes a while. So I would have waited. My 6 was working, still works. I do wear my 6 at night. So again, I wear these for health reasons, even though it kind of hurts me because of a nervous system condition I have. I wear it at night. So if I wake up in the middle of the night and my heart hurts or my chest hurts or whatever, I can quick look at my watch and see if my arrhythmia is doing okay. Both the 6, 7, 8, and 9 do the same thing. So yeah, I would be a little bit teed if anything was taken away from him, but at least it's only the blood oxygen sensor. And I have other means to do that because, like with everybody with COVID, I bought one to put on my finger. So at least I have that.
So to be fair, we don't know what Apple is or isn't going to do with the existing Watch 9s and devices that are out there that have the blood oxygen sensor that infringes that patent. So this is idle speculation we're making here as to whether that deal might include disabling that. Would I be shocked if that was the case? I wouldn't be. And let's be honest, if I'm Apple and I'm putting out 2 different hardware revisions, one that has the sensor and one that doesn't, it's eventually become a pain in the butt to maintain 2 different builds, for lack of a better term, for the watch with the sensor and the watch without.
I was going to bring that up. So if something happened with this, I did not buy AppleCare with it, by the way, but if something happened with this within the warranty period, if I went back to Apple, I would not get one with the blood oxygen sensor in it. Apple stopped selling these direct on their website in early December. I did buy this from Best Buy, did not get it from Apple. And I knew we were like one day away from somebody making a determination to pull everything from the shelves. I'm like, if I don't buy one now, I don't know when I'm going to get one. So there was a scarcity issue at the time. Like if I go another 6 months and my Apple Watch 6 battery completely goes, I'm just going to want a new one. And I wouldn't have been able to do it at the time. Right. So I guess from a scarcity perspective, it was a sales point for me, and which is why I bought it. But also my screen was slightly scratched. I just wanted to revise certain things with it.
So this is just something I think we should keep an eye on, because it's going to be interesting to see what precedent gets established here, because I'm sure there'll be other, not just Apple, but other companies that deal with patent disputes on some of the things that are on devices like this. Because I think from a consumer perspective, if I bought this and you take the capability away from me after I've bought something, I either want to be able to return it or be compensated in some way, shape, or form, because you've degraded the experience that I purposely bought to be able to do things. So I think they need to figure out, if they go that route, how the customer is then compensated. And this isn't me trying to go get a money grab. This is me being like, no, this is legit. You took capabilities away from me on something I bought.
Yeah, that's my wife has been eyeballing up a Apple Watch here, and she's been wanting to get one since it was rumored that the 9 was going to come out. So we were waiting on that, and then it came out, and then was just sort of waiting to decide on a couple things. And then this story came out, and so the decision she made was to wait, because she doesn't want to get in the situation where they're no longer available and no longer supported or something because of the feature, or a feature could get removed. So she decided to do a wait and see thing, and it's a shame, because she's rocking a Versa 3 right now, and she really wants to get a new a new watch with the fitness capabilities. So,
well, the SE was not affected because it did not have this specific blood oxygen sensor on board. And as far as the rest of the fitness stuff, it's still the same. It's only the blood oxygen sensor which is affected. And I don't think that affects the reporting from the workouts and the exercise, but I could be mistaken about that.
but that's one of the features she was looking for.
Okay.
And for the video viewers that are seeing this right now, and the audio viewers, I am weirdly looking down at the corner of my screen, because if you don't know this, I use a Rodecaster Pro OG original to record, and my screen was twitching on it right now. It was literally kind of twitching side to side. So I was trying to capture video. I got it a couple times before it stopped doing it, but it was doing it consistently. So check out the Discord. I'll post that in there when I'm all in there, and I'll show you that afterwards. I think I got one. I think I got two twitches and then it stopped, but it was doing it for a little bit. The last thing that I just want to say here right now is thanks everybody for coming back to watch us this year. We really are looking forward to the rest of the year. Going to continue on doing the once a month thing for now. See how that all works out. We will always post the date when we know it. We'll try to get a rough schedule together, but probably won't be for a bit till we get that all going, but we'll try to do once a month. So thanks everybody who came to our live chat. I know we got quite a few people in there. Greatly appreciate that. The live chat makes this a lot more fun. As much as I enjoy podcasting with Chris and SB, the live chat does make it a lot more fun, especially because a lot of people heckle me, and that is the most fun of it all.
Rabble, 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 rabble.
Chat is definitely way better than Chris or Steven. So thanks, guys.
And hey, if you got anything you want to chat about geeky wise, come on over to our Discord. That's GonnaGeek.com/Discord. And check out all the other awesome podcasts on the Gonna Geek Network. There's a lot of awesome geeky content on there, including Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D., where you can find SP and his co-hosts, and also All Things Good Nerdy, where you can find Chris and his co-hosts. Check that all out at GonnaGeek.com. and have fun chatting in the Discord. Is there anything that either of you would like to say before we go today, SP?
Yeah, for those of you, we were talking about Robin Williams before, and for those of you that like Robin Williams, I was a guest on a podcast called Wait You Haven't Seen, where Travis, who's the main host over there, gets together with somebody else and you review one movie that one or the other or both of you haven't seen. And in this case, we reviewed Bicentennial Man. If you're watching Foundation right now, you might have an Isaac Asimov twinge to you. And yes, Bicentennial Man was based on an Isaac Asimov book called, or novella, I guess it's what it's called Positronic Man. And that will be available as we record tomorrow, the 17th of January, over at Wait You Haven't Seen.
Chris, anything you'd like to say?
This is me on my soapbox. It's absolutely criminal that Better Call Saul, and specifically Rhea Seehorn, never won an Emmy Award for anything for the entire run of that show, which is amazing. They should be ashamed of themselves. Rhea Seehorn should have won a Best Actress thing multiple times, because she absolutely crushed it in a show that is arguably one of the best shows I've ever watched on television.
I agree. I actually just rewatched Better Call Saul because a few months ago I rewatched Breaking Bad. I have to admit, when I finished Better Call Saul, I was sitting there going, I think there's a strong case to be made that this is a better show than Breaking Bad from start to finish. However, on rewatch, I don't personally agree with that, but I do think there's probably people out there who believe that. But I think especially from a bingeability perspective, like, a watchability from beginning to end, the landing, I don't think does get stuck. I get why they did it in Better Call Saul. It continues to be a hard left turn at the end of Better Call Saul. I really slogged to get through those
NASCAR there?
Yeah, exactly. Because there was a NASCAR scene and everything. But no, I think from start to finish, Breaking Bad is still more cohesive than Better Call Saul. But Better Call Saul, just like, I enjoyed almost every episode. The last series, the last few, they still, like, on rewatch, I don't feel as good about them as I did when I first watched them.
There was a stat I saw, and I don't remember it exactly. It was something like it's been nominated 53 or 50 plus times and has 0 wins. That's criminal.
Yeah, and was thinking,
criminal.
We brought this Ray Seahorn thing up a few times. Is that your name?
No. Rhea Seehorn, I believe.
Yeah, we've brought that up a few times on here, and there was several scenes in my rewatch where I'm just like, bam there, bam there, bam there. Just, I can't believe that they snubbed her all those years. So yeah, no, yep. I agree with you.
I'm off my soapbox now, but since it was just Emmy Award season, it was worth bringing up.
I am glad you did.
Emmy Award, quote unquote, season.
But that's going to go ahead and take us to the end of the show. So, for episode number 408 of the GonnaGeek Show, I'm Steven saying apparently it's still okay for them to import the Apple Watch. But back in episode 345, we talked about them banning the OnePlus Buds from being imported.
And I hope everybody comes back next time. If you have a subject that you want to hear us cover, please let us know in our Discord at GonnaGeek.com/Discord.
I'm AI Chris saying I hope everyone has a good banana.
Thanks, everybody, for coming back today. Bye!
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for checking out another episode of the official GonnaGeek.com show. If you like the show, please give us a 5-star review in Apple Podcasts or a thumbs up on YouTube. You can always join us for our live recording sessions at www.geeks.live. And remember, you can find our full back catalog at GonnaGeek.com/show. If you're itching for more geeky content, check out other shows on GonnaGeekNetwork.com. Voice work was by Emily Prokop of the Story Behind podcast. That's it for this episode. We hope to see you back again next show.